everyone, welcome to the channel. It's Carolyn. Today I have an inner child healing prompt for you. I want you to go ahead and grab a book from your childhood. So I have Lily B on the Brink of Cool. And the reason why I chose this book is because it's one where I remembered a plot point to it like my entire life growing up. I remember reading the book, but for the longest time I could not remember the title and I could not remember the rest of the things that happened in the book. So I wanted to reread this book now as an adult to kind of take me back to that headspace and understand my inner child and what I needed from this book enough that it would stick with me and kind of do an analysis on it. And so I feel like sometimes when it comes to inner child work, we don't know how to reconnect with that part of ourselves. And I think by rereading a book that was influential to us in some way at a certain age can help bring us back to that headspace. So your why for choosing the book can be very different for you depending on what your purpose for this inner child healing is. It could simply be like me, you were curious about a book that you remember, but you don't really remember the main plots of it. And so you kind of want to see what has made those smaller plots stick out to you that you've carried with it and see what subconsciously has been affecting you since you read the book. It could be that you're trying to heal an inner child wound from that period of your life. And during that time, you were drawn to read a certain book. And so by reading that book, you can tap into your psyche and what you needed at that time to help heal that wound. It also could just be that you are wanting to do an inner child prompt and you want to go back to a really good time in your life and it's one of your favorite books and it's something that has really stuck with you. And so your why is that you want to tap back into that childlike energy and bring some joy into your life. It doesn't matter what it is, but by understanding that why, it's going to change what book you choose. And this is something that you can do with different books, with TV shows, with movies from your childhood, and help you analyze what about them brought you joy or brought you some level of comfort in order to help you understand and heal your inner child. I want to say if you're new to the channel, welcome. Please subscribe. I would love to have you a part of the family. I post new videos every single week and I'm going to have more videos of mine linked in the cards above for you to watch after this one. And so for this inner child prompt, I do have different questions that I want you to ask yourself before you read, as you read, and after you read. So we can use this as a time of reflection for ourselves as we connect with that inner child. So once you have decided on your why and what book you were choosing, I want you to go ahead and grab it, and then I want you to write down what you remember about this book and what feelings it invokes for you. Really focus on the nostalgia that you feel towards this book. Like I said, for me, my biggest feeling with it was confusion. I wanted to know more about what actually happened because I remembered an important part of the plot. Basically, it was in the climax of it, I guess, where it wasn't giving any details to the story, what led up to it, what happened afterwards. And so I felt very lost and confused of hey, I remember something super important from this book, but there's no other context. And I wanted to kind of answer that for myself. We're moving forward, at least if I didn't get anything from this process, at least I would understand what happened and no longer have that lingering question of what actually happened there. And so that was my overall feelings towards it. I didn't have enough context to know if I liked it, if I didn't like it, but I did vividly remember the cover. And I remember before I found this book, I thought it was called Libby because I didn't realize it was Lily B. That's how confused I was about it. And so it was only because I remembered On the Brink of Cool that eventually by plugging it into Goodreads is how I was able to find it, and then I was able to track it down and order it. And so for me, it was definitely a forgotten memory that was triggered one day, and then I wanted to know more. So confusion and intrigue were my emotions. These are the prompts that I want you to focus on as you're reading the book. I would suggest for you to journal all this while you read. And so as you read, you can write down little notes about how you feel or answer these questions in order to get a better understanding before you have the entire context of it, because your feelings might change as you read the book. So what I want you to ask yourself throughout your reading is, do you like the main character or do you dislike them? And no matter which that is, I want you to reflect on if they mirror you. What parts of yourself do you see in this character? And this can be very revealing because if you dislike this character but they mirror you, it's actually reflecting what about yourself you dislike. And once you are aware of that, you can start to heal it. So the main character in my book was Lily, and I did not like her personality at all. I'm trying to go back to my kid brain, and I don't think it was that jarring to me, but because now I'm not a kid, and I can see the entitlement, the selfishness, and the lack of empathy from her as someone where I don't really like those traits in people, let alone like even in myself. It was just like very jarring for me, and like typically if that was like an adult book that I would read now, I probably would put the book down because it's not a very likable character. There's not really a purpose to root for her. And so again, because I don't remember reading it as a kid, I can't remember if that was like such a big like dislike for me at the time, but I just pushed through, or what it was that made me continue to read the story. I'm thinking as a kid, I wasn't like analyzing it in the same way, because like when you're a kid, like you are like a little bit like more selfish and stuff, so that's where I'm assuming it stems from. But reading it now, did not like her personality. As far as did the character mirror me in any ways, I would say like, yeah, when I am being selfish, when I am acting in those negative ways, it is a mirror to that, but I wouldn't say it's mirroring who I am as a whole. At least I hope not. But I would say that like she's very much like the worst parts of people as someone's personality. So yes, mirrored, but not entirely, not my personality, not 100% of the time. And I also want you to focus on your emotions while you read this book. And I don't mean in the sense of there's a happy scene so you're happy, or there's a sad scene so you're sad. I mean for yourself. I want you to pay attention to what emotions you were feeling on this healing journey. If there's things in the book that is triggering you, I want you to take note of them and reflect on how you're feeling, and also reflect on if your feelings are matching what is the quote-unquote right thing to be feeling. Obviously there's no right or wrong way to feel, but there are societal norms with that, and I want you to pay attention if there's differences for you, because that could be an indicator to yourself of things that are actually more important that you need to bring your awareness to, because there could be subconscious trauma or incidents from your past that have changed your view on it that you also need to address in some form of healing. So my emotions while reading this book lean towards anger, frustration, and I don't know what the right word for it. I wasn't being condescending. It felt like the writing or the characters were being condescending, and it was annoying me. That's the right word. It was like annoyed, frustrated, angry with the book. And the reason for that, a big thing that I was noticing that I did not catch as a kid, is the body shaming and the diet culture that influenced this book. And the reason why it was very annoying for me is not because it's talking about like diets or things like that. It was the tone in which it was done. I felt that even though it was a book that came out in I think 2004, I would have read it from either 2010 and younger than that. So like probably 2005 to 2010 is when I would have read it. I can't remember exactly when, but I want to say it was somewhere in there. And so I know that was the culture at the time, but what kind of rubs me the wrong way about it is that in the book, Lily, the main character, is a teenager. She's 13, so preteen teenager. And I know at that time there can be difficulties with your body, with your size, feelings of insecurity, and if it was touched on in that sort of way, it wouldn't have bugged me as much. It was the condescension, again, where I can't tell if it was the author and their biases influencing the writing, or if they were just trying to like represent the culture of the time. I would have understood if it was like Lily at 13 with her body trying to like be skinny and stuff like that. Like I understand that sort of mindset, but I think like when you are writing like a book that's meant for like preteens or children, you do need to be a little bit more cautious with it. So as someone where it's like I could see how that could be like very harsh for certain people to read, especially if another like 13-year-old were to read that book, it can mess with their psyche in just ways that I don't think is beneficial to them. If it was like talking about being healthy, that would be different, but that's not what it was written as in the book, and so that's where I thought it was just a little off-putting. And I also want you to take note of things in the book that you simply dislike, things that, you know, maybe you didn't catch when you were younger, but now that you have grown, your views might have changed. I really want you to compare kind of your inner child and their perception of this book with your own perception of the book, with who you are now, because this is a really good way to understand the disconnection between you and your inner child, but it also can be used to see the bridge between you two. A lot of the issues stem from the fact that her parents are just not upfront with who the LeBlancs are, and that they're actually the Whites, and telling her like, hey, stay away from them because they're con artists, instead of saying like, hey, we have these family members that are up to no good. they're like, stay away from them, and expect her to like understand it. And so I personally, I'm not of the belief that you shouldn't tell kids things when they're relevant to them. Obviously, I think you should tell them things in age appropriate manners, but that was something that kind of annoyed me, especially because the one thing I remembered about the book series was that these people were basically con artists, and they were trying to manipulate Lily throughout the book in order to take advantage of them and try and get some money. And so knowing that while I was reading it, it was like very frustrating because of the family dynamics and stuff. But that's just because I've never really subscribed to that belief that you can't tell people things if it's going to help them. I understand, you know, keeping things from kids if it's going to hurt them, but I don't think if there's like people that they don't really interact with, telling them why and explaining things to them is going to hurt them. I don't like when things are overcomplicated, and I'm not just saying that for the book, I mean like in real life as well. When there's a simple solution and everyone's avoiding it because of their pride or because of their stubbornness, and that gets in the way, that is something I become very frustrated with. And so that's just something that like was very apparent to me. But that's not to say that I dislike the book. I think the overall plot was actually good, and I understand why things had to happen. It's, again, not a book that I would be like, hey, every kid needs to read it, or highly recommend to people, but it's also not one that I would say you shouldn't read it. Now, these are the prompts I want you to answer after you have finished reading the book. First, I want you to reflect on the book and what triggered you versus what triggered your inner child, because I want to see if the things that triggered your inner child now no longer affect you because you have healed them. But there also may be things that you didn't go through as a child. You have these new wounds that make the book trigger you in ways that your inner child wasn't affected by because they didn't have enough life experience. So I would actually say I don't think that this book did trigger my inner child. The things that rubbed me the wrong way upon rereading it are things that I think would have went over my younger self's head. So I think my inner child enjoyed the book. I think it was a fun and interesting book at the time for me. So there actually was a part of the book that did trigger me, and it seems like a very stupid reason. It was basically talking about like gifts, and how someone is not good at gift giving or something like that. But because of things that have happened in my life, it made me remember a situation, which I won't go into details about, but that is something that is recent. So that's not from my childhood, but because of the wording of the book. And then there was a reference to something else related to it in a completely different sentence, but on that same page, that combined made me remember the situation. And so what I thought was really interesting about it is that it's a trigger to me now and what my life experience has led to and the current situation that I'm in. But it's something that as a kid I would have read that page and it just would have been another page in a book. And so I definitely think it's important to reflect on what changes have happened over your life that changes your outlook on things and what makes things that are unimportant one day important the next. And so that's really something to remember, is that your perspective on life today and on things today is not the same perspective you had as a kid. I want you to take some time to reflect on moments of your life and see if you can pinpoint instances where this book influenced you. So I can definitely see moments where this book has influenced me in my life. I think the overarching energy of becoming authentic is something that subconsciously stuck with me, and I think that's part of why I have tried to become more authentic as I have grown up. I have found my voice and believed in myself more. I do also think that the fact that Lily is manipulated and conned by these people in her life made me extremely aware of people and their manipulations. And I think one thing that fortunately my childhood and growing up, I was more so aware when people were manipulating me or using me in some way, and I could kind of navigate that situation by distancing myself from them, by getting away from them, and not always doing it in an obvious way where they knew what I felt or thought about them, but in a way where I was protecting myself. So instead of like confronting people, I just learned the red flags and I was able to remove myself from those situations. And so I was able to kind of regroup myself, reground, and pay attention to those red flags that some people are not aware of. So I do like that the book brought an awareness on a subconscious level to people's negative intentions and motivations and the red flags that you can see in hindsight, because throughout the book there's so many red flags, but because you're blind to the situation you don't necessarily see it. And I think by going through that, it kind of taught me as I was growing up, like, hey, you might not understand it, but it stays in the back of your mind until all these inconsistencies add up, and then you're able to pinpoint who the problem is, and then you're able to get away from it. And then I want you to ask yourself why your inner child needed this book, and reflect on your time when you read this book and see what about you connected or resonated with the book, what drew you to it, and what made it stick with you, where it influenced you in some way, whether it was good or bad, because that's really going to show you what your inner child was craving at that time, and it also can show you what your inner child may still need. I would say I do understand why my inner child needed this book. Lily is someone where she's confident, but yet she's not happy with her life. She's confident in who she is. She kind of feels like she's too good for her life. And so there's this sense of feeling like she needs to be surrounded by cooler people, and she needs to act cooler, and like she believes she's destined to like do that one day. She starts off being confident, you know, writing, thinking that she's going to have a whole biography about her. So there's a level of confidence there, but she thinks that her life is not full of adventure. She thinks her life is very boring, very mundane. And as the book progresses, she's surrounded by the LeBlancs, and she thinks that they are cool, and therefore she thinks that she is even more uncool than before. So in the beginning, she's like uncool, but it's not her fault. It's kind of her circumstances around her that is boring. She herself is not boring. But then being surrounded by these cool people, she loses who she is, and she pretends to like the same things that they do. She loses herself and her identity with these people. And then we see at the end of the book, she kind of finds her authenticity. She discovers she wants to be a writer, and she believes in herself more. So now there's confidence, and it comes because she's authentic to herself. And I think when I was younger, something that I struggled with was that I always felt like people didn't fully understand me. They didn't get to know like the real me. And so there's like so many things that like I really was, but because I was very shy, I was very introverted, people assumed certain things about me that weren't quite true. But because I wasn't comfortable with them, I wasn't going to let them see the other sides of me. And so I feel like my inner child needed to understand that you can be authentic. And I think that's something I carried with me to this day. I become a lot more authentic with myself, with my life, because I've been able to connect with myself. And that's something I try and do here on this channel, is help people find their authentic voices and broadcast that to the world, you know, not keep it in. Because I think there's a big difference between knowing who you are and living your life as who you truly are. And I feel like that's a disconnect for a lot of people, that I feel I have bridged that gap, where now I'm living my life as I want to. That's authentic to me. But I definitely feel my inner child was not doing that. And so I understand that relatability. And by understanding the why, after doing this reflection and understanding how this book influenced you, I want you to ask your inner child if they regret reading this book. Even though it might have helped them in some way, is there other media that might have been better suited for you at that time? If there are things that you wish you didn't know because of this book, if it opened up different wounds for you, or left you with more questions than answers when you read it, if it left you worse off basically. Or do you feel like your inner child needed it? Is your inner child grateful that you read it and that you got the connection or the information that you needed at that time? Is your inner child happy with the book? Did it serve its purpose? I don't think my inner child regrets reading the book. I think it was very useful. I think it was entertaining at the time, even if it wasn't revolutionary. I do think there were certain messages that did stick with me, that have influenced my life. And after your inner child has answered that, I want you to ask the adult you if you regret reading it or not, knowing what you now know. Do you wish you read something else or never picked it up? Or are you happy with it? Did it serve its purpose in a beneficial way? Do you actually think you gained something from reading this book? So when it comes to this book, I'm very like neutral on it. I don't have like a super like, yes, like you need to read it vibe, but I also wouldn't say I completely regret it. Do I think there were other things that I could have read instead with the same messages that might not have been as problematic with some of the other messages in it? I think so, but I don't think it affected me in a super negative way. Fortunately for me, I feel a lot of the more negative messages went over my head, or I didn't take it literally. There was more distance from it where it didn't really influence me. So I don't really think I regret reading it. Like I said, if given the option, I wouldn't recommend it to people, but I'm also not going to say you can't read it, it's a terrible book, because I don't believe that. So I would say I'm pretty like neutral on where I stand with it. And then I want you to reflect on what you have learned during this experience. If there's a perspective on your inner child that you didn't have, but now you see. Now you understand yourself slightly better. Now you understand what you need or what you crave for in life. And you don't have to do all this in a day. It took me a couple of days to get through the book because of things that it was stirring up for me. So just go at your own pace. And this reflection could be something that you think about for a day, a week, a month. You could think about it all year if it's really important to you. Do this at your own pace, but I think that this is a great way to reconnect with that inner child and see things from their perspective and bring some insight into your current life about who you once were, and watch how you have developed and grown and how things have changed and adapt for you, but still honoring that inner child inside of you. And so if you decide to do this, please let me know how it goes for you in the YouTube comments down below. I would love to hear from you. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up and share with others. I post new videos every single week, and I can't wait to see you all in my next one. I hope you all have a good one. Until then, bye.